Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans, presented by New Age Products, the official garage and outdoor kitchen provider of the New Orleans Pelicans. We're getting closer to the NBA draft. We've taken a look at Dallas and San Antonio, as we will take a look at the Philadelphia 76ers and Jim Eichenhofer as to what they may do in the NBA draft this year. Overall thoughts on Philly before we get to Adam Aaronson, who covers the 76ers for us.
What an odd draft lottery it was this year that the three top teams picking, including the Mavs, Spurs, and 76ers, are not in the mode of, someday we think we're going to be good. They're all in immediate, we want to win now mode. So I think that's where the Sixers are. That makes that unusual that they're picking third, but they're also not that far removed from being a team that won 50-plus games and was really what you would call a contender in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, let's see what their new process may be going into it. But we'll talk to him, and also we'll hear from Andrew Lopez as we break down our continuing prospects, the two players he's going to talk about, Jim.
They are Jeremiah Fears and Khaman Maluach.
All right, well, we will see what he has to say about that. But first up, to Philly we go to get a little lowdown on what the 76ers may be doing. All right, as we continue to preview and get everybody ready, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, for the NBA draft, which is coming up here at the end of the month, we got to take a look at what the other teams may be doing. So up to Philly we go. Adam Aaronson, who covers the 76ers, joins us. Sir, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Doing well. How many times do people ask you about the process? I almost feel like it's synonymous now with the 76ers, right? But that process has been a process, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think for as long as Joel Embiid is here, it's something that we'll hear about quite often around these parts, and even maybe when he's gone, we'll still hear about it too, just because the whole trajectory of the franchise still is unquestionably tied to that period.
And I want to start here in terms of it's interesting. I feel like the Pelicans, the team that we cover, obviously, and the Sixers that you cover, in ways that we really didn't want to see at all, had very similar seasons last year where, we're talking rampant injuries. We're talking two teams that went into the season at least coming off a playoff appearance and had pretty high expectations. And then the whole thing just goes sideways with major injuries, tons of guys being sidelined, all the way across the board. And one of the things I noticed when I looked through this Philadelphia stats is just like the Pelicans, the Sixers only had two guys that played 65 games or more over the course of the whole season. So you only had two players that, if they were in the running for NBA awards, would have even been eligible for that. So, I feel like how much of that was just the entire story of the Sixers? I feel like we need to have these fan bases needed like a support group, like a therapy session based on what we experienced over the 82 games.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And both situations, teams that built good rosters that I think a lot of people expected to be, contending for a playoff spot or maybe greater. And then things just never really got off the ground because the injuries were just completely unrelenting. I think the Sixers ended up using 30 players over the course of the season, which is almost unfathomable to me. And even you mentioned, the two players that did play 65 games. I believe those were Gershon Yabusele and Ricky Council the fourth. Mm-hmm. And, Yabusele was the last guy they signed to their roster on a minimum contract in August. Ricky Council was an undrafted player in his first full season in the NBA. Just the sheer dollars that were being spent on players that were not playing so consistently was really unlike anything I've seen before. It's not. I certainly agree that Sixers fans and Pelicans fans probably could work in the same support group and both benefit from that, because it's really, again, just a situation where neither situation could even get going. You couldn't even really see the potential that you imagined. It's not like it started out well and then things went off the rails so quickly. it just never got started.
Yeah.
And so, both teams at least have clear, a nucleus of talent that they can build on moving into next year. There's no question the Sixers and the Pelicans both have a lot of talented players, and they got to stay healthy, at least more than they did last year.
For sure. Yeah. This is something I was talking about with Gus recently. It feels in some ways like last season never started. That it never actually, it feels like I'm excited to go back to begin next season to start back at 0-0 at the beginning of the year, because I mean, the Pelicans were, I can't remember, it was like 4-14. And when you're at that point, especially in the West, that things are looking very bleak and it's going to be tough to come back from that. You mentioned the two players specifically for the Sixers. The Pelicans were pretty similar in that their two players that played 65 games or more were Yves Missi, who was a rookie, who was the 21st pick in the draft, not, one of the top first guys picked, and then Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who was really a role player. So that's another interesting comparison. While these two teams had very similar seasons, unfortunately from our end, the lottery was not similar to what happened with the Sixers. The Sixers ended up jumping up to third. Can you describe what the reaction was from the fan base and people in general with the outcome that happened in May with the lottery?
A whole lot of relief, because the would not have kept their pick if it had fallen outside the top 6. It would have gone to Oklahoma City. They had a 64% chance of keeping it, which it's not it's almost a 2 out of 3 chance, but that means a 1 in 3 chance you lose the pick. And I think people here were sort of the mindset of, well, if this season has gone this disastrously, surely this pick is going to fall to 7, and it's going to be the best it could be without us getting it. Luckily for the Sixers, that was not the case. They jumped up to 3, and they had to jump into 3 or 4 once the first 2 picks went to Dallas and San Antonio. So they caught a break that unfortunately the Pelicans did not. But they still have their work cut out for them in terms of not just making this pick, but getting guys like Joel Embiid and Paul George healthy and building a roster surrounding them that elevates the whole group and gets them back to the championship contention status that they want to be in.
Were you or people around you confused when on the ESPN broadcast they said Philadelphia loses their pick, and then they actually had to correct it? Maybe, I don't know, a minute later they realized that it was really confusing in their defense. But I mean, was that something that made you guys kind of scramble of like, what is going on right now?
So it's a great question. So for better or worse, I'll say, feel like I have a pretty good handle on how the lottery works. And so I understood what was going on, and I had written a story that morning that was basically a guide for Sixers fans to watch the lottery. Here's what you should look for. And one of the things I mentioned was, if 2 teams jump them, they could also jump themselves. So it's not over until you actually see a card with an Oklahoma City logo. And luckily, I think I was able to prevent a few heart attacks in the Philadelphia area. There was a lot of confusion. And yes, as you said, to be fair to ESPN, it's a massively confusing system. And I'm sure of all the scenarios they could have prepared for, Dallas and San Antonio jumping was probably not near the top of their list. But yeah, it was quite a few minutes there. And then even crazier was the 3-minute commercial break where are they going to jump to 1 now? What's going to happen here? It was quite a moment. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Sixers fans have enough experience watching the draft lottery in the last 10 years to have a decent handle of how things go.
Yep. You mentioned the feeling of relief for the Sixers to know that they were going to keep their pick. Now that we kind of fast forward to June 25th, when the draft first round is going to take place, how do you look at it right now in terms of, I mean, is it more likely that they keep their pick? Is our trades on the table? How do you see kind of the perspective it feels like every team in the NBA, maybe if they ended up 1 or 2 in the lottery, you pretty much know what they're going to do, but 3 seems to be the pivot point. So how do you look at that in terms of what they might do?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. 3 is the pivot point of this draft, which is what makes it so interesting on my end to try to figure out what they're going to do, because really every option is available to them. I think it's always smart to guess that the team will keep their pick and stick there, because it's just hard to make trades. But I would definitely not rule out the idea of them moving down the board if there's a team, whether that's, the Pelicans at 7 or Brooklyn behind them or Washington in front of them or Utah, whoever it is. If someone, believes that one of these prospects that's going to be available at number 3 has, star better upside and the Sixers don't see that player, maybe there's a deal to be made. Maybe the Sixers can pick up an additional asset or two, add some more depth, still come away with a premium young talent. I think that's something they'd be interested in if the right offer is there. But generally, I think, it's sort of an odd spot on the board for them because their two best sort of long-term cornerstones right now are both guards in Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain. And this is sort of a region of the draft where there are a lot of perimeter oriented guys in that mold. When you talk about, Trey Johnson from Texas, VJ Edgecombe from Baylor. My opinion is that they should take whoever they think the best player available is and figure out how it all fits together later.
Yeah.
I don't think that their position is necessarily good enough that they can, worry about fit when you're picking as high as 3. They have the 35th pick in the second round. If they want to focus on fit there, fine. But I think the 3rd pick is too significant of a resource when you're talking about a player that could be the face of your franchise in 5 years from now and even 10 years from now. So I think whoever they view as the best player available will be the pick. Interestingly, Daryl Morey, we have 2 decades of a sample size of him running NBA teams and almost none of him making draft picks this high. It's just not something he's done before. He's said openly before the lottery, after the lottery, that his plan is to take the best player available in the first round if they have their pick, and now knowing that they're at 3. And I think that's what they'll do. There's a chance it, incites awkward discussions about, is there a trade that has to happen down the line to make all of these pieces fit together? But I think Morey's standpoint here is taking the best player available, taking the guy with the best chance of being a star in 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Last thing from me, just on the outlook of the Sixers overall, I'm not sure if you had listened to this recently. There's been discussion about next season's Eastern Conference because obviously with Jason Tatum's going to miss a chunk or maybe the whole season, it's kind of seems wide open. And I heard Zach Lowe, Bill Simmons, maybe a couple other people kind of list, okay, how do you rank the East in terms of short term or maybe medium term over the next 3 to 5 years? And it seems like the opinion on the Sixers is kind of, I think Zach Lowe maybe had them 12th, which to me is stunning because it just seems like the Sixers, you still view them as a contender despite the fact that they had the season that they had. But I guess my question is, I mean, do people in Philadelphia, the fan base, do you see it just as it's all about like still trying to be a contender next season? It's just so much more about the short term of going back to, the 50-win team that they've been pretty consistently in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an overwhelming sentiment here of frustration that the team has obviously had a lot of talent for many years now. We're talking 7, 8 years of clearly they have, they've had championship level talent or borderline. But they just, I mean, the infamous conference finals streak that has become a major talking point here. They haven't been to the conference finals in almost 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people view that now as, a milestone in and of itself. And my question is what happens if you get there and then you get swept in the conference finals? Does that make it worth it? But that's a different discussion. But there's definitely a sense of frustration with just how long this has been now and Joel Embiid's ongoing injury issues and the fact that a lot of people believe that they're not going to be able to rely on him moving forward, which is why, like you said, Zach and Bill and others are sort of souring on the future of the team is because they're paying Embiid $248 million over the next 4 years and Paul George, I think 161 over the next 3. And they need those players to be consistently available and play at the level that the Sixers are paying them to play at. So a long-winded way of answering your original question is I just think that there's a lot of frustration that's been built over the years here. And a lot of people have just decided that they're inherently skeptical of everything that the Sixers do. And, if things start to go well and start to click, then I'm sure they'll all be back and excited. But for now, there is a little bit of, I don't think apathy is the right word. I think that might have been what happened if they lost their pick. but I think the pick has given some renewed optimism. But just a sense of dread of, what's going to be the next thing that goes wrong, that sends the franchise into a tailspin. And if there's one way to get out of it, it's to draft a franchise cornerstone star in the top 3 of the draft.
Speaking with Adam Aaronson at Sixers Adams, the way to go follow over on X. He covers the 76ers for the Philly Voice. I think what's interesting is listening to you just now, Adam. Joe Dumars, who took over here for the Pelicans recently, said the draft is a public and private way to let everyone know, from the fans to obviously elsewhere in the NBA, what you would tend to be, like who you are, what's your focus, and what's your name, sort of. It's interesting because I hear you talk about, and specifically with Paul George and also with Joel Embiid, the money and the contracts are still there. So the Sixers are still based around them, huh? I mean, I guess how you look at it.
Yeah. Frankly, I'm just operating under that assumption until there's much reason to expect another team to be interested in trading for either one. Because right now I just don't think it would be responsible, particularly with Embiid, who has such significant health concerns that are also somewhat mysterious, especially now with the second apron and all of these extremely restrictive salary cap things that go on. I expect those two to be here for next year and probably the foreseeable future, particularly Embiid. And there are worse positions to be in than have a 9-time All-Star in George and an MVP who might have won his second MVP in a row if he hadn't gotten hurt 2 years ago in Embiid. But the fact of the matter is, George is, he just turned 35. He's not getting any younger. He looked less explosive. Embiid is now on the wrong side of 32. It's not a perfect situation. It is one that they can look themselves in the mirror and say, if everything breaks right, we can be right back in the thick of it, contending for the championship. And that is true. They have the talent to do that. If Embiid is playing, he has the ability to lead a team to those heights. If Paul George is healthy and playing, he has the ability to be a key cornerstone of that team. They've both done that before. But a lot of people would rightfully say there's not much evidence that things are going to break right for them.
Yeah. And I guess, Adam, the reason I asked you that, and Jim, was because something you said earlier about, hey, maybe drafting somebody in 3 to 5 years could be the cornerstone or somebody that this franchise builds around. Because as you said, you take contract, you take age, you take that third pick. It's the ability to be able to get somebody that maybe, isn't expected to be the franchise face now, but 3 to 5 years could be. So it is interesting to kind of look at it like that.
For sure. Yeah. And by the way, I mentioned at the beginning the support group for Pelicans and Sixers fan bases. I think Paul George needs a support group for the next week or so with the NBA Finals going on now. He's the target of everyone's criticism and ire with these two teams that are playing in the finals.
Yeah, I think if you try to draw up a nightmare season for Paul George, it would involve everything that happened with the Sixers this year and then a Thunder Pacers finals. And all of that came to fruition. I almost feel for him to a degree. I was asked on the radio here a few nights ago if I thought that if he was gonna attend the finals, if he was gonna attend the games, and I said I don't know if he would, but if he does, whichever crowd it is should give him a standing ovation.
Yeah, I was gonna say front courtside seats. I guess something
he supports both teams.
My advice for him would be to go to some tropical beach somewhere, get off your phone, don't check the internet, and just count the money that's coming in. That's the way I would cope with the NBA Finals.
Yeah, that's how he spent his All-Star break, and there were some people in Philadelphia who weren't entirely pleased with the Instagram pictures from whatever luxurious resort he was at.
Okay, so maybe scrap that advice then.
Yeah, well, if he doesn't post it, I think it's ideal. But it's a big off season ahead for him. He's got to get healthy. He's got to look more like the guy that they thought they were getting. That can, if he is that guy, can lift a team like this. Can be a significant piece of a contender. But he's got to prove it. And he's now back to podcasting just like us.
Well, now look at it like this, man. As we wrap up with you, I don't know if it's a plan, but it's what we got right now, right? With this fan bases, with both the Pels and 76ers, it's called Hope. And one of the things that we've touched on is what's crazy is with all the big moves, all the big trades, all the different things that the NBA's done with their salary cap structure. This is going to be the seventh straight different, NBA champion in 7 years. So hope is it can be the Sixers or Pels at one point, right? I mean, that's how you look at it.
Yeah, I do really enjoy it feels like these were the least predictable playoffs that I can remember, at least for quite a while. When you look at a team like Indiana making a run that they made and having at least one of the most absurd wins you've ever seen in every series. I think Oklahoma City, everyone expected to be here, but still, I think everyone has a lot of respect for the way they built this incredible team and are set up to sustain it. Yeah, it's been really fun, and I think like you were just mentioning, particularly in the East, with the Boston's probably going to be in somewhat of a gap year. Cleveland should be very good again. Obviously, Indiana should be very good again, even the Knicks. But it does feel, particularly in the East, wide open. Now, I think the Pelicans have a fair right to ask, why aren't they in the Eastern Conference?
I'm with you. I am with you, Adam.
I'm sure you guys have discussed that many times when looking at the standings.
No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, the Sixers were in the play-in race for about 6 weeks longer than they should have been because the Chicago Bulls also were not winning any games, and somebody had to be the 10 seed. And it was kind of comical to look at the conference's standings back to back. But yeah, I mean, you just spoke to it. It feels like there's less predictability than ever in the NBA right now in terms of which teams from year to year are going to be really good.
I want to point out one quick positive. Let's end this on a positive note for Sixers fans. There was a recent excellent development besides what happened in the lottery, and that was the New York Knicks did not make the NBA Finals. So thank you to the Pacers from the Sixers fan base. I'm sure that made people happy that they didn't have to watch the Knicks in June basketball.
Not just that, but old friend TJ McConnell in the NBA Finals.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I promise you, there are Sixers fans that if TJ McConnell wins the finals, they will celebrate it like it was the Sixers. TJ McConnell is one of the most beloved Sixers of the last 10 years, and rightfully so. Yeah. He has an incredible story and worked really hard to get to where he's at. And for him to now be a 10-year NBA veteran who was the sixth string point guard entering training camp and then made the roster of a team that went 10-72 is really remarkable. So yeah, Sixers fans, I think, have enjoyed this Pacers run, even though maybe there's some regret that the team didn't trade for Tyrese Halliburton, which they're not the only ones. So yeah, it's been a fun playoffs, and I think Sixers fans will definitely be firmly in the corner of Indiana.
Adam, as always, man, appreciate the time. Thank you so much. We'll be following you and check in with you throughout the season. Hard to believe it's 3 weeks until the NBA draft as we record this, and then boom, you got free agency, and then here we go. See what takes place here when September and camp start.
Should be fun. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you, sure. Give him a follow over on X at Sixers Adam, Mr. Aaron Aaronson, Sixers beat writer over on the Philly Voice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Time now to take a look at another pair of prospects as we get you ready for the NBA draft. And television sideline reporter for your New Orleans Pelicans, Mr. Andrew Lopez, continuing to give us all of that info that he's been studying, hours and hours of film and everything on Jeremiah Fears and Khaman Maluach. Is that right? Hours and hours of film?
You could say that. Yeah, let's say that.
We will. Okay. Hours and hours of it. Anyway, two interesting prospects, as we continue to take a look as we get closer to the draft.
Yeah, I think one of the things about once you get past Cooper and Dylan Flagg, a lot of the next dozen or so guys, you could probably stretch that a little more, is really kind of up to the team. I mean, I think there's probably teams who could have these guys anywhere from 3 to 15. I really do. And there's probably teams who have it that way. Like Sam Vecini from The Athletic, he came out with his draft guide. And for instance, he has Fears 18, he has Khaman at 12, and I've seen mock drafts that have Jeremiah Fears in the top 5. I've seen draft reports that have him in the top 5. It's really
wow.
going to be settled on, what does a team really need from both of these guys, and what are they expecting from both of these guys, and having a plan in place. And I think that's kind of the key is a lot of these guys, you need to have a plan in place to make sure that everything is going to go in the right direction.
Yeah, Andrew, I think that was one of the challenges for me of how do I figure out, we decided on a number of 12 guys that we were going to talk about because we have 6 podcasts and we're talking about 2 players per episode. So I just decided to use the default of the NBA.com consensus mock draft because I feel like that's at least some way that we can kind of look at a bunch of different draft sites, average that together, and say, here's some of the guys that are going to be, or at least projected to be near the top of the draft, or at least in the lottery part. Because to your point, too, I mean, I've seen Ace Bailey, a guy that we previously talked about, as 3 in a bunch of mock drafts, but then there's other people that have him maybe in the double figures, like at 10 or so. So, I mean, there's definitely some, I mean, Will Guillory used the word polarizing. There's definitely some guys that there's a pretty wide range of opinions on some of these players. I think one of the things I guess we can start with Jeremiah Fears in this episode today with you is, I think this is also the case with Maluach as well, that these are actually 2 players that we're seeing their names pop up a lot in terms of going to the Pelicans at 7. So on the most recent NBA.com consensus mock draft, which could change by the time that we post this, but could change at any moment, Fears is actually number 7 to the Pelicans. So I get, starting with him, I mean, what are some of the reasons why this is a guy who has kind of zoomed all the way to up the draft board? I mean, there's people that have him going even before 7, so it's not like he's definitely going to be even available at that pick. But I mean, as a novice college basketball fan or a super casual fan, he's not somebody that I necessarily knew much about, but going back a year. But I mean, what do you think are some of the reasons why teams across the league are looking closely at him?
Yeah, so like Cooper Flagg, and obviously we talk a lot about the fact that Cooper Flagg reclassified, right? Like Cooper Flagg reclassified and was playing a year up and should be heading into college this year. Jeremiah Fears is the same way. He is 18 years old, and much like he'll turn 19, I think, just before the season starts. Like he'll turn 19 like in training camp, or he'll play preseason games at 18 years old.
Yeah.
But he still possesses elite tools. His draft age is obviously a big key. One thing he can do is he's going to score and he can play make. So let's start there. We'll start with the good for Jeremiah Fears. Those 2 things, I think, definitely stand out. You look at how he was scoring, I think, toward the end of the year, and you saw a lot about, his ability, one, also to get to the free throw line. He averaged almost 6.5 free throws a game. He had 7 games this season where he got to the line at least 10 times, which for a guy who is 6'3", 180, that's fairly impressive. That's not something that you would necessarily think that he was going to be able to do. Also, as the season went on, you saw him start to kind of pick up his production. Yes, had a couple of down games in the SEC. Had one against, I think, A&M where he didn't score at all. Another against Georgia where he scored 2. But everything else, he had a really good conference tournament. He had a really good game against UConn in trying to get to where he wanted to go in the NCAA tournament in their lone game in there. But overall, a very good player who can get to a lot of things. Another guy that I follow, it's hard for us, and I know we're going to talk comps in a second. There's a guy I follow on in draft Twitter, which is its own animal now.
Its own universe.
It's at Draft Casual, and what he does with these guys is he takes them and he looks purely at the numbers in terms of their measurements and their production in college and tries to predict them that way. And so I think that's kind of a good way to look at it. And you see how he rates as a scorer, how he rates as a playmaker, how he rates as a slasher, how he rates his free throw rate. And then you see some of the other things, you don't like necessarily the fact that he was shooting 28% from three. But when you look at some of the threes that he was shooting, I think he was trying to do a little bit too much in that system. And I think if you can get him into a system where he's more controlled, you should see that go up by evidence of the fact that, he did shoot 85% from the line, and that is usually more of an indicator of how you can shoot at the next level.
Sure. Yeah, by the way, just looked it up. His birthday is October 14th. So like you said, he's going to be turning 19 about a week, I think exactly a week before the regular season starts next season. You mentioned the amount of times that he's able to get to the free throw line. I think when you watch a video of him, one of the things that immediately stands out is how quick he is and just his athleticism.
Yes.
So we're talking about a guy that gets to the free throw line not by baiting defenders, not by getting guys off balance and, looking for a whistle. It's more just a guy that can just get into the paint at will. And I think he probably puts defenses in a position a lot of times where it's like he's going to score a layup or a dunk if you don't foul him. So I think that's kind of the prototype player that we're talking about. Before we get into the comparisons, you mentioned it. It does seem like the shooting part of it, the perimeter shooting part of it, is the thing that people wonder about the most. But basically what you're saying is that, on an Oklahoma team that wasn't loaded with talent, he had to create a ton. So now, when you translate this to the NBA, there's no way he's going to go to a team where they're going to say, we need you to score 20 points a game. So basically,
right.
You're saying like you put him in a role that is more fitting to what his strengths are, and then maybe he gets more spot up shots. He doesn't have to do so much where he's taking pull ups and taking contested threes, that kind of thing.
Right. I think it's kind of the same thing that when you looked at Dylan Harper and when you looked at Ace Bailey, there was just different things that they were going to be asked to do for that Rutgers team that didn't have as much talent than what Fears did. I think what you do with Fears, looking at, a kid again who was not supposed to be in this class, is supposed to be going to school right now. You look at that and you see, that's really good. And he has some skills that play right away. His ability to get by defenders, one of the things that makes him at 6'3", 6'4" in shoes, because that's how you play basketball. One of the things that makes him so good is his first step. And when you can get by guys the way you do and the way he does, that's what helps you get into the lane. That's what helps you get all those free throws. And it's, I think as we have seen, I think unfortunately this has been a huge part of discourse because of who the MVP is right now. But drawing fouls is a skill.
Sure.
And and then to your point of how you do that is key. So would still like to see him. There's obviously a lot of areas for improvement, but again, I think once you're by Khan and once you're by VJ and even in that 4, 5, 6 range, these guys need fits and strong situations to kind of make sure that they can take the ascent. And that's probably for most draft picks in most years.
Sure. You mentioned Fear's first step, and I think as I go into the pro comparisons, I think a lot of these players, whether they're former players or current players, a very rapid first step fits the description for pretty much all of these guys. But some of the names that came up for Jeremiah Fears are Jeff Teague, who I think a lot of people now know as a podcaster, but he was a very good point guard in the NBA for a long time. Monte Ellis, Reggie Jackson, John Wall, Jamal Murray, and Jordan Poole. Who are some of the comparisons that you like among that group?
Yeah, I like the Monte Ellis one, and I think that was one that it made sense from a numbers perspective. And you look at, again, some of these other things that he does. You look at when you go back to production in college, he does compare favorably to somebody like De'Aaron Fox. And I think one of the things that we look at when we see De'Aaron Fox is we think of him as one of the fastest guys in the NBA. I think Jeremiah Fears is probably one of the faster players in this class. You think of an inconsistent 3-point shot. I think we've seen that as well. you're hoping you could see the mechanics, you could see it there. You probably just need to get somebody to do that. I think one of the things, if you look at it, where is he getting these shots? And I think that's going to kind of be key for him is, he took a lot of pull-ups at Oklahoma. In fact, he took 71 pull-up threes. He made 15 of those. You eliminate that,
yeah,
and
that drags
automatically.
That drags his percentage way down. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think that's going to be a big key where he's able to kind of get that up. And again, it's who's in the right fear or who's in the right mind to kind of look at these guys, and you see like a lot of these guys and how they're able to go. And I do think that he is somebody who in the right situations could potentially be a elite guard. Maybe he's not a guy who is gonna, if he was going to, play major minutes on a playoff team right away. But if you're trying to have somebody who you think can turn to a lead guard sooner rather than later, he's a guy who kind of fits that mold.
Do we have any good Pelicans comparisons, players that have played here over the last 23 years that are similar to Jeremiah Fears?
When I say this, I want to kind of, make sure people realize what I'm saying here. It's what Cairo was supposed to be when he got here before the knee injury, or what we saw Cairo turning into before he tore his ACL. You remember that?
Yes.
There was that few week stretch right before he had kind of gotten his spot back in the rotation. He was, again, Cairo is one of these same guys. Cairo was a reclassify early guy who had a very, very fast first step, who, you wanted to see more from the 3-point shot. I think he's probably the closest on the Pels side, but I think Fears obviously has a lot more tools when it comes to being able to get to the free throw line and things like that. But in terms of speed, I don't think we've seen somebody like that since Cairo.
Shifting to Khaman Maluach now, I think one of the things that stood out from the draft combine when they did measurements was there were a few players that kind of measured below what people expected, but this guy was not one of them. I mean, what are some of the things that make him attractive potentially as a lottery pick or somebody that could go pretty early in this draft?
7'2", 250, and again, another 18-year-old kid. He's going to turn 19 in September. And I think one of the more impressive things about him is the fact that at he was 17 years old, and he was in the participating in the Summer Olympics. He was a part of that South Sudan team that made that run. Obviously, he wasn't getting huge minutes on that team, but the fact that he was even able to, he made the World Cup roster at 23 in 2023 as a 16-year-old, and also made the team for the Paris Olympics. So he was, all these guys last summer are getting ready for college and what's going to come, and this kid's playing in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Before going to Duke. So just an absolute stud, and is still kind of learning the game. He went through the NBA Academy in Africa. I remember seeing some early videos of him trying to learn and trying to how he was going to do this. So I think one of the things is he has a lot of the raw tools. You mentioned the measurements. He's almost 7'1" without shoes, nearly 7'7" wingspan, a 9'6" standing reach. Like those are, and I know we're going to get into the comps in a second, but those are like Rudy, Donovan Clingan, Mark Williams. Those are those types of measurements, and there's not many people in NBA who have measured better than he has.
Is in terms of some of the questions or things that he's going to have to work on, I mean, is it, to make a long story short, is his offensive game really more about just trying to expand beyond the paint and kind of layups, dunks, finishes? I mean, the video I see of him, he's an incredible lob threat. and a guy that can score around the hoop, but it might be the kind of thing where, you can't always live off of that diet in the NBA when you're playing against better players.
Yeah, no, he's got to get a shot, and I think one of the things is he started to work on that shot. I think he made at least a three in the NCAA tournament. Started to show some ways there. Obviously, I think you want to see his hand get a little bit better. He's not a guy like once it gets to him on the offensive end, it's gonna stay there. It's where can he continue to improve, and I think we can continue to see that shot improvement. And again, you look at somebody like this, you look at their free throw percentage first to kind of get this idea of, will they be or can they be a shooter at the next level? And I think he is one of those guys that can. He shot 76% from the line. He's a guy who, despite he had a very small diet of 3-pointers, did make way. And it won against Monte Mary's and Duke's first game of the tournament. But you would, again, like to see him expand a little bit to have that part of his game, because that is going to be essential for him at the next level. That's going to take him from being, and that's why so many teams are hiring, because they see that as his offensive potential. That's going to take him from being, a Rudy Gobert ceiling to somebody who we haven't seen before or anything like that.
Yeah. You mentioned the shot and him working on it, and something that he's going to have to continue to do to expand what he can do offensively. As we get into some of the pro comparisons, I think you'll see from the list of a handful of guys here that really only one or two of these guys have that kind of game where they can shoot threes or they can score from beyond the paint. But the 5 guys that I had down here are Mark Williams, another Duke guy, Brook Lopez, that's, I guess, one of the guys on this list that can shoot threes, but it wasn't part of his game early in his career. Jakob Poeltl, Ivica Zubac, and then Kel'el Ware. Of those guys, which comparison do you like the most?
I think I like the Mark Williams one. I think that one's kind of the one that makes most sense. I think when you look at how he is to some of these other guys, obviously you're going to draw some natural things to Rudy because of his size. You're going to draw some things to Khaman because of his size. Both of those guys, especially, like almost size, they're almost exact matches in terms of size. And I think Khaman, he's a little faster than both of those guys. Have tested a little faster, despite being 250. So you like what you see from him. From that, the problem is if he can't get that shot going, where does that change him? Does that drop him more to the Mitch Robinson, the Clint Capelas, the Nick Claxtons, or can he be a little bit more? And I think having to be able to pass out. When you only had 20 assists in over a season, he has to be better there. Has to be able to make that play, because that's a guy I could run a guy at him. He's going to turn the ball over, and I can move out of that. But he's got great feet. He's got extreme length, and if you get him in a situation where he can develop, it's one of those guys who, for some teams they see him as again a guy who could be. He's going to go in probably the 6 to 10 range, 6 to 9 probably, but could end up being the second or third best player when it's all said and done. The way some people think about what his skills can do.
Lastly, from me on Maluach, what about Pelicans comparisons? Anybody that he's reminiscent of?
It's hard not to look at Eve and kind of follow their same path because of what they're going to be able to do in the defensive end as soon as he steps in the court, to the amount of basketball he has played in his life right before this, and the willingness, I think, to get better. I think we've seen that. We saw that up close with Eve throughout the year. You guys have seen it probably a little more, seeing him being there throughout the summer. So he has to kind of be, I think, a little bit of a bigger force on the rebounding. Kind of like, it's almost like what we saw from Derek Lively when he was at Duke. The rebounding numbers are a little similar, but I think watching him kind of do that that's probably the easiest Pels comp that I think we'll see.
Jeremiah Fears, Khaman Maluach. Little breakdown from Andrew Lopez, television sideline reporter for your New Orleans Pelicans. Get back to watching hours and hours and hours and hours of film for us. Appreciate it. Thank you, Andrew.
Will do, sir.
Sounds good as always. And we'll continue as we get you closer for, of course, June 25th and 26th, Wednesday and Thursday, rounds 1 and 2 of the NBA draft. As always, Andrew appreciates it. Mr. Jim Eichenhofer appreciates it, and I do as well. Thank you for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans podcast presented by New Age Products, official garage and outdoor kitchen provider of the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans podcast.